Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Shadi Curry. I have a very special guest. I know I say that about a lot of my guests, but Vikki is so special to my heart. So she is a time coach, a feminist time coach specifically. And not just that, but Vikki is my friend, my coach colleague, and she is my own time coach. So I have coached with Vikki. It's probably right about 2 years now on how I see time, how I use time, how I approach productivity, quote unquote. I'm holding up quotes on productivity because we have a lot of thoughts about what that word means. And she's really helped me not be in this hustle mode in life, not just in my business, but also just in life, wanting things to happen with impatience, like all of those thoughts that we tend to carry about the things we want to achieve. Vikki's been really pivotal in helping me relax and rest and take time out and enjoy the present. So Vikki, welcome to the podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to delve on a topic that I don't speak about often. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I do want to caveat right at the beginning that Vikki is not divorced. So we will talk about her dating journey, but it's not a dating after a divorce journey. Vikki, please tell the listeners kind of a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Yes. So I'm a feminist time coach focusing on how we use our time, not time management, how we optimize our time, how we rest, how we switch off, how we partner with time instead of traditionally what we've been taught to do, which is really work against time, compete with time. There's not enough time. Time is the enemy. And yeah, I work with clients through time hackers, as you know, so people can join my lifelong coaching program. I also train coaches as time hacker coaches. And now I also work with companies. So we'll go into companies, we will help individuals and teams and entire businesses support their employees around their time problems.
Amazing. And you've been doing this for years now, but before that, happened before that?
Yeah, this is such a funny story. So I've not been divorced, but I do have an ex that I was with for 7 years. And then I went from that to being single for basically a decade. Not quite a decade, I'm exaggerating, but I've not done the maths in my head and it's on that side.
It felt like a decade.
And so then when I did get into a relationship, which we'll talk about afterwards, how that happened. But when I did, I was suddenly hit with relationships aren't the answer to happiness. My whole life becomes a movie. It's kind of then you settle back into real life. And I actually struggled in that relationship. So I decided, as I was coaching at the time, and I'd just taken this is 2016. I just took 10 free coaching clients from all over the world. And then after them, I was I'm going to be a relationship coach, because this would totally help people in their relationships. And I very fast realized I didn't need to become a relationship coach. I needed to hire a relationship coach, just because I think, I just had never been in an adult relationship. And I completely overlooked that. We moved in together after 2 minutes. There were just so many things that looking back, I'm obviously I needed support. And I probably, like so many of your listeners, came from the mindset of but I'm an independent, ambitious, powerful woman, and I can do this all myself. And not only can I do it myself, I'm going to do it for everyone else. And very fast put the brakes on there, which was best for everyone.
Yeah. But do you feel because I say this often, that compared to business and work and getting a job and career, there is almost no education on relationships in the world, even though it's just as significant, maybe more so significant than our careers.
Well, I completely agree with you. Not only is there no education, there's no normalized idea of there being education around it. So even though there is probably more resources, even this podcast and working with you, there's more access to information and resources on this than ever before. We still, so many of us think we shouldn't need it because it's not been normalized to invest in this area.
Yeah. And I think that's a problem that's kind of put on women. That's like a burden that's placed on women. You're supposed to be in a relationship. You're supposed to know how. You're supposed to just come out of the womb knowing what a healthy relationship looks like, even if you don't see it in your environment. And then you're supposed to just get into one. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing that you said, I will be honest, I do find being in a relationship amazing a lot of the time and challenging as well. And in the moments where it's challenging, like I would give up like my career, my business, like everything else in my life, because it is super important to me. So it's not even just equally important to my work. It is more important. It is a part of my life that I personally value very highly.
Yeah, we're social creatures. We were created more so for relationships, I think, than all relationships than we are for this work and hustle and grind that gets kind of put on us. All right, well, thanks for just telling us a little bit about yourself. Let's see, should we talk time first or dating first? I want to talk time first.
Okay.
Personally, that's what I want to talk to you about. What is I just really want to know your thoughts. You say our relationship with time is not time management.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think I compare the time management industry, and it is an industry, to the diet industry, where there's 1,000 plans, and if any of them really worked, there wouldn't be any other plans. Everyone would just do that one. But what I see people doing is jumping from I'm going to wake up an hour earlier, to I'm going to buy a new planner, to I'm going to color code my calendar, to whatever I'm going to plan on a Sunday. We're constantly thinking the perfect plan, the perfect time management tool is going to allow us to get ahead, create breathing space, and feel on top of our to-do lists and priorities. And it's literally not working. Much like the diet industry, we're creating more inefficiencies, more stress. Managing time is literally another thing to manage when we're already super busy. So that's why I tend to teach everything against time management. And listen, if you're listening and something works for you, your calendar works for you, writing a to-do list works for you, then I am so pro you doing what works for you. This is really for those of you that are I should be able to plan. I should be able to follow my calendar. I should be able to know on a Monday what Thursday is going to look like. What if you shouldn't? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, one of the things that the time management industry has created is this kind of blame game with time, where there's not enough time, there's too much to do, time is a problem, time needs to be fixed. And the interesting thing is, time is fixed. Time is literally, we know how many hours there are going to be in a day, we know how many days there are going to be in a week. It's a known variable. So it's us and our relationship to time that has to change. For everyone listening, even imagine dating time. If you were dating time right now, how would you describe that relationship? Is it loving and nourishing and two-way and open and communicative? Or is it blamey and judgy and avoidant? Really think about that, because shifting your relationship with time will have a way bigger impact than any new planner that you buy.
Yeah. If we're constantly telling time, well, you're not giving me enough, you're not enough, you're not doing enough, there needs to be more of you. You just slipped away, you're never around when I need you.
Yes.
That's not going to be healthy. So what do we do about that? What is the shift from all of those thoughts, which I have those thoughts, all right, I'm going to plan this week and I'm going to try this and I'm going to try that. And I'm a Virgo. So there's something about to-do lists that make me happy. Even when I don't need them, I make them. Everything is in a list. What is our relationship with time? How can we think about time differently so that we can create that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, really what I would say to anyone is think about someone that you have a good relationship with. This could be a friend, a neighbor, a sibling, a pet, it really doesn't matter. And think about how you describe them. Oh, they're always there when I need them. There's plenty of them. Our relationships are really our thoughts about someone else. So the best place to start would be mining your existing positive relationship thoughts. And the other thing that I would encourage, my time hacker process, right? So there's so many different things that we could touch on here, because there's probably 30 or 40 different tools. But the other one that I will mention is radical responsibility. We accidentally, as a society, give time too much credit and too much responsibility. And what this looks like is saying like, time heals all wounds, or right time, right place. And these are just sayings that we've kept saying, but what they do is they make us less powerful. Like if time heals all wounds, then we're not responsible. Like I even think about, for your niche and for the people listening, if like time, what's the saying about heartache and time?
Oh, the time heals. I've heard time heals all wounds.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's like around that. It's very
like
similar.
if you just wait a certain amount. Oh, I'll give you one that I was actually told. I was in this like divorce program very early, and someone said, well, in order to heal, you need to not date for 1 year for every 3 years that you were married in order to be truly healed. And I was like, so I was married, by the time my divorce was inked, it was 20 years. So I was like, so you're telling me 6 years? Like there's something wrong with that. I don't think that's right.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like over allocation to time. And so what do we do then? That we remain powerless to do anything. We just have to sit there and let time pass. But as I always say, time passes, but time is passive. And that's why two people, you know, can be at the same length of time in their post-divorce journey and living completely different lives. And that shows us that we are powerful. We are more powerful than time. And when we take that responsibility and we take that credit, we become the change makers.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. Like instead of saying time is the driving factor for our goals and the things we want, seeing that we are the driving factor.
Yeah.
And I think when we see that, things change, because when you look at, because I think about it in terms of like when I talk to my kids, I have 2 kids in college, and I talk to them about that, okay, 4 years. And there's some of this passive, like if I just go to school and do these classes for 4 years, then this will happen. And thankfully for both of my college kids, they don't have that mindset, because we've talked about it. I'm like, no, this is like see your college years as a container to create whatever you want.
Yes.
And, you know, they go out and they look for opportunities to do fun things, adventure, travel abroad. Like they've just like packed things that they love, and then they've deprioritized things that they don't want. So if there's like a class they need to pass, they like don't try to get an A. They eventually do get an A or B in it, but they don't try to get an A in it because they know there's this other thing that means a lot more to them. I love that idea of like, we are the drivers. So like, let's apply that to dating, where people get told, well, it takes time. You have to go on 100 first dates. Yeah. You know, you have to, I don't know. There's all kinds of things.
I will say, I think there's a difference between being willing to go on 100 first dates and having to. And that for me is the difference, right? It's like, we don't know how many dates it will take. Like nobody can tell you how many days it will take. That's not something that we can say, like it's going to be 3 days and that's it, because we don't know who you're going to meet on date 3.
Yeah.
But the willingness to go on the 100 dates, I think that's the difference. Like the commitment to the result that you want, and the willingness to explore, to fail, to have bad dates that become funny stories, hopefully. That's the difference, I think.
Yeah, I tell my clients to just choose their own number.
Yeah.
I'm like, I tell them, I was like, lean inside yourself, into your own intuition and your own heart, and what you know about yourself, and then you give me a number.
Yeah.
And then go and make sure those 30 dates or 20 dates or whatever are really good dates, so that you're in this higher level of dating versus this lower level of dating.
Yeah, and that's like 20 or 30 opportunities to learn and get clear about what you want, what you don't want, how you want to be, how you don't want to be, how you want to show up, like all of these things. So I love that. Just go and get the dates and take all the juicy learnings.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about decisions, because that's a big one with dating as well. Like I'm always like insisting and pushing my clients to make decisions, because sometimes they will be in limbo. There's like, well, there's this guy and we've gone on 3 dates, but I don't know. And they can stay in that I don't know for 3 months or 6 months or even a year.
Yeah.
What do you teach about decisions?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. Like before we do anything, we have to decide about it. So a lot of us have a narrative that we're just not good decision makers. And everyone listening, I just want you to just even think about the number of decisions you've made today, from what you wear to what you're eating to listening to this podcast to where you are sitting or walking or who you spoke to last, whatever it is. Like, we are all expert decision makers. And I just want everyone listening to know that you make decisions. So you have that skill already. But the beautiful thing for our brain, which, evolved at a different time and evolved at a time to, avoid failure and all of that good stuff, is it knows that if you don't make a decision, you can't fail. If you don't make a decision, you can't make the wrong choice. And so often we're so afraid of being wrong, because wrong throughout our evolution used to mean like picking the wrong berry and ended up being poisonous. Like, we're talking about really deadly things. So our brain developed this strategy of indecision to keep us alive. But that doesn't work with dating. Like, it might seem super intense at times, but dating is not deadly. Like, it's not a poisonous berry. That's not what we're talking about here. And I think there's just this widely accepted culture and norms around decision making that it's almost not just justified, but celebrated. And, it's like, oh, it's very thoughtful to give decisions more time. Here's what I'm going to be very honest with you all about. If you are someone who gives decisions months about dating, our brain's natural state is to avoid new things, to stay quiet, to stay safe, to keep doing what we've always done, to stay in the cave. And the more time you give a decision, the more time the primitive part of your brain has to talk you out of doing the scary things. So we think that more time is better when it comes to a decision, but more time is more time for that fear part of your brain to talk you out of the decision that you instinctively felt when you first heard it. And so I would encourage everyone listening, I have a process called accelerated decision making. Just list out the dating decisions that you have right now and make them on purpose, knowing that some of them will be wrong. And I say wrong in inverted commas because I don't really think anything is ever wrong. It's always just a stepping stone. But allow yourself to do that, because our fear of being wrong and not being right 100% of the time is like walking in, what's it called, that mud that you get sunk.
Oh, it's quicksand.
It's like walking in quicksand, and it's like we're stuck in the quicksand, and it's like the dating life you want is right there, but you've chosen the puddle with quicksand on purpose. Like, you want to get out of there as fast as possible. Like, really, really, I would say whatever you are not deciding, you are actually deciding. If you're deciding to not be in a relationship with someone for 3 months or message them for 3 months, you're not in indecision. You've decided to not message them. You've decided to not be in a relationship with them. And when you own that, and you're like, if I'm not deciding to be with them, I'm deciding to not be with them, that can propel you into honest decision making.
Yeah. Oh, I love that word, honest decision making. When we're being honest with ourselves about what we're doing. The way I walk my clients through that is I will be like, okay, there are only 3 buckets where this man can go.
Yeah.
Most of my clients are women who are dating men. I'm like, he's either a yes or no or maybe. I was like, all right, let's start there. Put him in one bucket. Like, they have to put him in one of the buckets. Okay. The yes and the no buckets are easy. If he's a yes, all right, let's go. If he's a no, tell him no. Yeah. If he's a maybe, then my next question is, what do you need to know to then put him in a yes or no? So then they're making a decision about making the decision.
Yes.
Like, well, I don't know his financial status, or I don't know anything about his family. And so when they now know, okay, I don't know these things, then it's like, okay, well then go on date number 4 and ask those questions.
Yes, so simple.
Right. And it's really just pushing the brain to come out of that quicksand, like you said, and going to the next step so that you can move forward.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. When you talk about so we have time, acceleration, we have decisions, and then you also talk about defining success. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Can you talk a little bit about that? How can we define that in a way that is nourishing and good for us versus what we've been conditioned to do?
Yes. So one of the things that my clients do is move away from the perfect planning and towards creating success on a weekly basis. But the issue is, and I even was brought into a board meeting the other day and a training, and they, ahead of this like 6-hour meeting or 8-hour meeting, whatever they had, I asked them, like, how are you defining success at this meeting? And it was like, oh, we've not even thought about that because we're so busy in the to-do list. Mm-hmm. So for everyone listening, I want you to think about how you would define success this week. And I want you to make it measurable. Now, sometimes that means maybe like going on 3 dates. And sometimes that means moving my confidence around dating from a 5 out of 10 to a 6 out of 10. Like, you can create measurement tools to support you. But the reason why we want to do this is because it creates filters for our brain. So we spoke about decision making a minute ago, and we spoke about right before that how many decisions we're making every day. The easiest way to create priorities is to create definitions of success and then set what we are doing or not doing based off of that. So for example, if you're defining success as finding a long-term relationship, or as going on 3 dates this week, and then it gets to Thursday and you've not spoken with anyone and you've not set up dates, what you're doing for yourself is creating data. And that data is saying, oh, like, I set this definition of success and I've not done anything about it. Why? And then we get to use that, and through coaching with Sade, also my program, like, we use that as like there's the underlying reason, there's the root cause of why we are misusing our time. And that's what we want to solve for. So defining success really, the other, actually, I'm going to just jump on this because this is another big mistake I see people do when I speak about defining success, is your success definition shouldn't be a to-do list, and it shouldn't have more than 3 things on it. The reason being, and I also encourage you to create easy success, right? Like, it could be my success this week is going to be on a podcast interview, already knowing that I had this lined up, because then I get to create the rest of the week from success. So you might say my success definition for the week is to talk to one new person on the phone. And that might seem like, oh, well, that's small in your brain, and how we've been taught that like only the big things are worth celebrating, which means we spend 99% of our lives not celebrating. So we want to instead create small, fast success early on. Then we get to live out the rest of our week from a position of success instead of chasing success. And that's a very different mindset to come to things from. It actually, around dating for sure, creates such a release of pressure and an ability to be present. So that's what I would say about that.
Oh, that's so powerful, because I do notice that a lot of my clients, their definition of success is, if you were to ask them, what's your definition of success this week? It would be, at the end of this week, I am in an exclusive relationship with the man I'm going to marry, even though I haven't gone on a date in 3 months.
Yes,
yes. Of course, think about that much pressure.
Yes.
To say, oh no, success, nothing between where I am now and being in a relationship is successful. But, and we have challenges in my program where we're like, okay, 10 dates in 30 days. Mm-hmm. And when we map out the chart or whatever, it's like, okay, we had 10 phone calls, or we swipe, even swiping right on 10 people, it counts as something to celebrate. Having one phone call counts as something to celebrate. Going on one date, getting us, like, we breaking it all down into little bits, and everything is, or even just completing one of the worksheets on visualization or whatever of your relationship can count as success. It's not just when you're in the relationship.
Right. Otherwise, we spend this is one of the big mistakes around goals generally, that has us spending most of our time in failure. And I love that you break it down, because I call it success hacking through celebrations. And I just think all the reasons to celebrate all the time, it's like you're fueling your brain with like positivity and not just like, oh, the sun is out today, but like you're driving that positivity. And if we, leave our brain to its own devices and its negativity bias, we're never going to be doing enough. We're going to be really far away from what we want. We're going to be doing it all wrong, and everyone else has it figured out except us. So we have to balance that seesaw with like, oh, this is what I'm doing well. This is what I'm celebrating. This was fun, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. I mean, this stuff is like life-changing, because I remember going through all of these modules, and then the other modules that you have in Time Hackers, and applying it to my business and the work that I was doing. And the feelings, like it was really transformational, just in the way I felt about what I was doing and how I saw success in my business. So, so good. All right. So now we want to hear your juicy story about how you dated and how you met your husband.
Yes. I mean, it's funny because I remember being in the position where I was dating for a husband, and this is when I lived in London. And I remember being on a few dates and looking across and like not even listening to them because I was too busy in my own head thinking if they were going to be my husband or not. I was like, oh, a lot of my friends were married before me, were married before I was still single, had kids when I was still single. And so I really put the pressure on myself, like I should be where they are. And then, and then I quit I did an eat, pray, love, or whatever you might want to call it. Like I quit my job. I left my flat where I was living. I moved to a different country. I started my coaching business. This is in 2016. And I had a friend getting married overseas, and I went to their wedding and I booked just an Airbnb for the month. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I just know that I'm like miserable there in all the areas. So and then a week in, it was actually my birthday. I was in a club and I met this guy, and he was completely inappropriate. He was like younger than me. He was living at his parents, at his mum's, and he was going to go live back in Australia. He was just there for the summer. And I was like, this is never going to be anything serious. Now, the one thing I will say is that as soon as I saw him across the dance floor, because all my friends had like gone off, I remember thinking like, he looks harmless. And at the time it felt super insignificant, but now I think it's super significant because what it tells me is I immediately felt safe around him. How wild is that? So wild. But then really, we both carried on dating each other for that month because we were like, this is never going to be anything serious. We removed all of our barriers and boundaries, and we just had fun. And it was just about enjoying each other. And we joked, like within 2 weeks, I was at his mum's house meeting all the family. Like we did everything that you aren't supposed to do. And in 10 days, I posted a picture of us on social media, like, Sunday, Monday with this guy. Like I did everything the gurus that are telling you that you need 3 times as many years to get over. Like they would all be like horrified at what we both did. I even think I argued with him once about like him going out to see his friends when we'd been like hanging out for a week, like really uncool stuff.
Yeah. But I love that because it really, when I tell my clients, okay, you can't marry a guy you just met, the reason is because they don't necessarily have what you had in that moment. So in that moment, you were dating him and doing all of these quote unquote rushed things from a place of, I don't need this relationship to end at the altar.
Yes. Oh, I was like, this is not ending at the altar for sure.
Yes. And that's what made all the difference, is so that if something had gone wrong, if you had seen a big giant red flag at any moment, you would not have had any trouble being like, oh yeah, well, I knew this wasn't going anywhere anyway.
Yes. And I mean, I left to go to the US. So after 6 weeks, I think I extended a week or 2. And then I was like, okay, I actually have to go. And then I was in the US and I went to a cousin's wedding, and it was in Houston, everyone was married. And I was like the only single one. I was like, this is so triggering. But it actually led me to call him and be like, hey, I miss you. Instead of like playing it cool or being like, well, it's over. I was willing to be vulnerable, and I was willing to fall flat on my face. And even as some of my close friends or family were like, this is ridiculous, this is obviously not going to work out, you have to let it go. I just remember thinking like, I don't know what it is, but I know it's special, and I'm totally willing for it to not work out, for me to get to experience these feelings again, that I accidentally have put so many barriers up so that no one even had a chance of coming close to me.
Yeah. Those barriers, when I'm talking to my clients, a lot of times they put up the barriers from the fear of failure.
Yeah.
Even though you really want this relationship, you're so afraid of not having it that you put it's like this really tangled web where it's like, yeah, but the barriers are keeping you from having what you want. Like I'll talk to a client and they'll be like, well, I don't want to go on a date with anyone who isn't exactly what I want. I'm like, yeah, but it's going to take time. You got to like go on like 3 dates to know if they're exactly what you want, or, little things like that show that openness to just, I'm just going to date. I'm just going to date 2 or 3 guys. I'm just going to be there because I'm going to keep myself safe. And I think that's what I hear you had the ability to keep yourself safe in that relationship.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what happened next?
Yeah. So I went to the US for a few months, and then I think I was in Vegas when a guy started hitting on me, and I was like, oh, like, I don't know what to say, because I'm kind of talking with someone, but I actually don't know if I'll ever see him again. And I spoke with him, and we decided to become boyfriend and girlfriend, not knowing when we'd see each other again. And then his grandma lived in England, so he flew to England, straight to London, straight to see me. We hung out with some friends, and then he went back. And I was obviously like not working at the time. I was back in with my parents. I was building my coaching business. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm just going to go be with him. So we met on my birthday on July 15th. And on like by early December, I'd flown out. We moved in together to his mum's. And then a month later, we moved out into a little studio. And that was when I decided I'd be a relationship coach. I was like, this is hard.
So how long have you been married now?
So we got married a few years later. We've been married 4 years now.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
And not just married, but you have a baby now.
I know. And it also changes things. I do think a few things that I did invest in relationship coaching the first year of our relationship. And I do think that that was such an amazing gift to our relationship. And I think so many people are like, oh, I don't need coaching until we've been married for 10 years or on the brink of divorce. And I think it was such like a gift that I gave myself, us and him, to like make that investment, because as you said, like, I didn't know how to be in an adult relationship. I didn't know how to be in a relationship and be living with someone. Like, I still don't know.
So true. Like, and because even if you have seen a lot of healthy relationships, there's something unique. I tell my clients, I'm like, listen, there's you, and then there's this person who is a universe unto themselves. And then there's this energy that you both create between you. And it's not something you haven't experienced before. So actually the last part of my program is learning to be with this person that you've chosen. So the beginning part is dating, and then the middle part is choosing and evaluating and all those things. And then when you've chosen someone, you're in a brand new container.
Yes.
And if you've been divorced like I was, you've been in a whole lot of shitty containers before. So being in this new, healthy, loving container actually requires a little bit of letting go of some of the old thoughts that don't come up when you're dating, right? Or sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't, like, or suspicions. I remember like on my third date or fourth date with my husband, and he was telling me how the car he brought to our first date was his mom's car and not his car. And I was like, that's a red flag, big giant red flag, narcissist on board. Right? Because I was referencing the other relationships I'd been in where status symbols were used to manipulate, and, people were lying, and he was just like trying to impress me. Right? So there really is, when you are in a new relationship, there is work to be done, and there's work to be done ongoing. So like there was that work that I had to do. And then there's the work I do now, being remarried and blending a family.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's always work. There's always work, whether you do it with a coach or you do it on your own. But I think understanding that, not just that it's work, because I also don't like that word work when it comes to relationships, because that's used in abusive relationships to sort of keep women in there, like, oh, you got to work at it. Right? This work doesn't feel like a hostage situation.
Yeah. Exactly.
This work feels like growth, and it feels productive, and it feels like you're releasing things and you're changing your thoughts and you're becoming a better version of yourself as you do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also want to share, I'm just laughing, I've probably been on like 1,000 dates in my life.
Oh my gosh. Tell, like, from what age to what age?
I mean, probably from like 14 till now. No, if I'm excluding my husband, till 2016. So 20 years or whatever. And part of it was like, I think I also saw dating, especially when I lived in New York or lived in new places. I really saw it. I really valued the relationship instead of the outcome, right? Like, and also the experience instead of the outcome. Like, to me, the measure of a successful date wasn't simply we're going to get married, but it was like, am I going to have an interesting conversation? Am I going to learn something new? We're going to share a new experience, even if I'm just going to learn something new about myself. And I think that meant dating for a long time was really fun. I do think along the way, maybe there were like, not like heartbreak, because I wasn't necessarily in long-term relationships, but there were like trust broken, or like expectations not met, and a lot of pain and like loneliness and all of that stuff as well. But I do think like now I'm so grateful. I think my people skills evolved, my confidence evolved, my willingness, and like the like colors in my life, it's just full of like life and colors and experience, because I was just willing to date and put myself out there. And particularly I think with the online dating as it is now, I think it's so easy to actually hide, and it feels like protecting ourselves, but actually any decision made from fear perpetuates that fear, and any decision made from trust perpetuates that trust. And I would say to anyone listening, like, it's not about, for me and Gid, it wasn't about me trusting him. I was never in such a clean place of trusting myself, and because I trusted myself, he wasn't the only guy that I dated that summer. Like, before him, like, I'd been on like a few dates or whatever, and there was one guy that like my friend had to get on the phone and tell him to stop calling. Like, it wasn't, I was right, I was in the right place, I was trusting myself to navigate. And if it wouldn't have been Gid, I just knew for sure, even when we said goodbye, I was like, oh, I'm going to meet someone. Like, it just was so obvious.
Yeah. And I want to point out that going on so many dates, you build some skills.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of practice.
Yeah.
You learned how to book a quote unquote book a date, show up in a way that kept you safe, interact, talk to men.
Yes.
Like, for many women who have been married for a long time, our lives tend to revolve around our children. So the skill of just talking to a guy, sometimes we lose that if you even had it before. If you got married really young, you might not even have that. You might have been hanging out with your girlfriends. You picked one guy, you married the guy, you hung out with other couples or the parents of your kids' friends. And then now you're out here and you might not have the skill of just hanging out with guys as humans.
And that's why it can feel so daunting, and it requires so much of us, instead of like just starting with like a 30-minute going on a walk, or a 30-minute or whatever. I'm sure you have all processes for people, but like, we're not asking or suggesting that you go from like 0 to 100 in terms of like going on a weekend away or whatever with someone you've known. If it feels daunting, what that probably tells us is like, there is a skill to be built here.
Yeah, 100%. And it's one of the things I really want to advocate for is just education. Like, we need to tell our little girls and our teenagers that, hey, this is, along with your 20-something years of education that you're planning on getting, you kind of read some books, get a coach, get some practice in this area, so that it doesn't feel so intimidating, it doesn't feel so scary. You can trust yourself to have the knowledge and the skills that you need to be successful here.
Yeah, I even think about it with time. It's like kind of the opposite with time, where we're given like one very rigid education, and then no one tells us it can look any different at any point ever. So we end up making decisions as though we're still school children when we're adults.
Yes. Oh, so many things. I mean, I feel like we could keep going. There's just so many things that need to be corrected in our thinking around this. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to ask you, is there any advice, anything that we haven't touched on that you feel like, I really feel like women who are dating in 2023 need to know this?
Listen, we are at a time where you have so much information at the touch of your fingertips, and so does everyone else. And I would just be very honest with yourself about like, if what you are doing is productive to what you want to create or not. Because I think there's a lot, I see this in my clients, there's a lot of busy work, there's a lot of busy connections, but are you actually committed to like I say, like if there's one step on the process that you're not doing, like maybe it is going on that date or making that phone call or going on the second date, whatever it is for you, think about doing it, not because that person is the right person, but because you're willing to build the skill of that phase that keeps blocking you. And just allow yourself to be bad at something in order to be good at it. We're all bad at things. I promise you, there are people that are like, I mean, for sure, there are people that are like Vikki Yaffe. She's like really bad at the time. She's really disorganized. Like, that's how I was. So just allow yourself to evolve and change and just learn skills.
Yeah, 100%. I wrote on my list, my to-do list today, not my to-do list for today, but kind of like my to-do list for like the rest of the year. I was like bookkeeping. I was like, I really want to put my hands around it. Like have a bookkeeper and everything, but like there's some parts of it that I want to be able to understand. And it's a skill. I'm like, okay, I want to be able to read a balance sheet. I want to be able to do these things in my business and not just have other people interpret it for me. They're just skills that we're always going to be learning. One more skill and building on it probably for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Vikki, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. Let's talk about what you have going on in your time programs right now.
Yeah, so I mean, as you know, there's Time Hackers, which you're a part of, so anyone can join, and it's like lifetime access, community, modules, programs, group coaching, one-on-one coaching, the full shebang, a one-stop shop for all of your time needs to take you from busy and overwhelmed and pressured to spacious and ahead and present. And that's like my flagship program. But also for the first time, we are allowing people to book sessions in packets of 6 with a one-to-one time hacker coach. These are like 20 minutes, laser focused sessions, really amazing if you've got a specific project that you keep putting off that you want done, or a project that you're involved in that's not moving how you want it to, or dreams that you keep pushing aside, or tax season is here, or whatever it is that you're like, right now, I just need some support around my time. I feel like I'm drowning. That's where to start there. And also we are going into companies. So if you work at a company, firstly, they may sponsor you in Time Hackers, and in particular, the Time Hackers one-to-one coaching. So you can always email us and we'll send you information to help you get support there. And if you are a team leader or HR or anything like that, then talk to us. We can come and help your people.
Amazing, amazing. And we're going to have links to all of this in the show notes, as well as the link to my podcast episode on Vikki's podcast. And your podcast is called
Hack Your Time.
Hack Your Time. And after I worked with Vikki, probably for about 6 months to a year, and I just saw some amazing results in my life and in my business, Vikki invited me to come on her podcast to just talk about the results I got. So the link to that podcast episode will be on there as well. And I encourage you to just follow her podcast. Like, she talks about a lot about fear and our fear of like taking on the big things that we want, taking on our goals, and time, how to hack our time and all of that. So all of those links will be in the show notes. There is no human, I think, who could not use your work.
Yeah, listen and then send it to everyone else.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Vikki, I really want to thank you so much for coming on. I want to acknowledge your impact on my life and my relationship with time. Thank you. And I just want to thank you for sharing so generously with the listeners today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a treat.
Absolutely. All right, listeners, we want to thank you for your time and attention today, and we will see you next time.